Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Hello, how are you?
we're fine.
We've got a new proposal below you, just so you know. Matt just handed that out. That, right, the one you had your hand on,
That's
Senator.
what we talked about in
Right there.
at Don's office.
Right. And I think Chairman, or Senator Steinmetz was in the office when they,
Yeah, Steinmetz is in there.
just start with what we left off with. And this is obviously the revenue, the flows, revenue
Yeah.
stuff. We weren't interested in going to completely permanent. You weren't interested in our approach. So maybe here's a different place.
Trying to go over it.
Go ahead. Representative Summers will kind of just walk you through where we are.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to review where we were at before. So the House proposal before was that on the 1% severance, 50% would go into the school foundation program account, basically, and then 15% or 50% would go into the permanent mineral trust fund. And then we had the LISRA at 2/3 to the school foundation and 1/3 to the LISRA. And so then, and then it was mentioned that you folks wanted to look at permanent accounts. So what we came back with as a proposal was that we would do 10 years of the 1%, all of the 1% for 10 years into the common school permanent land account. And then it looks like then 50-50 thereafter, it shows on this chart.
I think we would prefer to cut it off at 10 years and just provide just an end to that, and then the legislature has to decide.
And then it reverts to the existing law of the permanent mineral trust fund.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we go 10 years, and then it goes back to the permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund after 10 years. After 10 years. And then as part of that deal, we cut our LISRA refuel down from 2/3 to 50% going into the school foundation program, and then 50% into the LISRA.
Reserve account.
And we take that for 4 years.
No, that's forever.
We're gonna have real trouble with the appropriations on the floor if we don't put them in. And
We thought it was 4 years. No. The school, it goes into, for 2 years, it goes into the SFRA. And then from there on, it would go into the school foundation. That was just because of but no, it's not for 4 years. No.
I'm not sure.
And just so you know, if you want to look back at the previous sheet, we didn't stop it. It kept going.
Okay.
So we backed off on the percentage. We backed off some of the percentage, Mr. Chairman, but we did not, it was not stopped on the last one. So we didn't, this proposal does not include a end date on that as either.
You're giving us floor trouble. I personally don't care, but I got an appropriations committee that does.
So, Mr. Chairman, so why don't we, and would have to visit on this again, I'm sorry, but, we could, maybe we do the same thing. We go back 10 years, we do 10 years SFP, 50% SFP, and then 50% LISRA. And then after 10 years, it goes back to being in the LISRA. I really don't like that, actually, because we don't have any permanent solution of funding for the school foundation.
Well,
And
I don't think there is such a thing, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect. The world on our finances is going to change so much that whatever we do, you get 10 years out, we'll have changed it.
well, I would look at that, but I got to kind of go back to my peeps too
Yeah.
on that one.
Yeah.
I'd look at 10 years.
If we don't have a hard date on that, I think we'll have troubles we may not be able to control on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, just to add to that, I think when we are cutting things like DD waivers and home health services, that's the predicament that we find ourselves in is cutting essential services to our populations most vulnerable to protect funding for the school foundation program. And I would agree with the chairman that nothing's ever permanent. I think the notion that we're fixing this today in this moment isn't accurate. We've got years of work ahead of us.
Mr. Chairman. And I know negotiations always get tense and we get grumpy. And I'll just remind the body that we gave you a tax solution that would have not hurt anybody on the general fund side. And so as a part of the negotiations, we're moving your way. But we did give you another alternative that you chose not to go down.
Well, yeah, we took a vote on that and it got 5 votes. So I gotta,
We can have no votes on this proposal too, so. I mean, here's where we are. We'll take this back and look. Would you like to look at the other parts of it?
okay.
The federal
wanna go
fund
on to
part, the federal fund part, et cetera?
Yeah.
Maybe Chairman Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I too would also like to see what it looks like in perpetuity, if we're still backfilling the school foundation program account from LISRA, and then in perpetuity, we're going with the 50%. I mean, what kind of money are we talking there? And how does that work? So I agree with the good chairman here and the good vice chairman that we've made some extremely hard decisions on the appropriations committee this year. And thankfully we were able to put some funding back into some of those key areas, but it's a very difficult decision to, we've got a structural problem here that we need to deal with in a variety of ways, but we also would like to see a little more reduction than what we're able to do this time. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll take, we'll take this back to our guys and folks, not just guys, the gals, and we'll run that by people.
Okay, let's go to the you want to do the other details in the bill?
Let's just do Mr. Chairman, let's just do the federal stuff. We talked
Okay.
about that last, but we left as well.
It seemed to me we had an agreement. We were going to get rid of the restrictive language and go with a 75% of what they get in the districts get in the stimulus check goes into a special reserve account, can only be spent for the things in the model going forward. So it's protected. And you've got that exception that is in the Senate that is necessary for, they can spend it on maintenance. There's an exception that they spend money on the maintenance of effort, maintenance of equity. And I would suggest the figures of, I had 24.6, I'd suggest that we say 75%. So round that up and protect 75% of it, and 25% they don't have to match. They don't have to set $1 aside.
So, Mr. Chairman, to be clear, the first half of the money never leaves the state. So half of the money that goes out is in that 45 million in that first box.
That the 45 million is a separate discussion. It's not federal funds. It's the reduction to of school foundation funds going to the model. That's the way your amendment works. And that's not in dispute between the two houses.
So, Mr. Chairman, to your point, though, we are sending out the 45 million in federal funds to make up for the difference in state funds that we're holding back.
No, there's nothing there. What we're doing is saying that we are sending the school districts 273 million And they have to spend that within the federal parameters. But we aren't putting in up, we just say they have to spend it within the federal parameters, and that for $3 out of every 4 we get, they have to put 3 into a reserve account going forward. So it's preserved. So absent demands for the maintenance of effort, maintenance of equity, which is the unknown, you're going to get reserve accounts at the district level, restricted reserve accounts of it'll be over 200 million and short of 210. If you go the 75-25.
So, Mr. Chairman, and I could never understand why we were turned around from each other. I was always talking 75 and I was talking 25, and that's really is my position's 25. I finally figured all this out. And the reason,
You're saying only putting 25 in the reserves?
yeah, I mean, you can negotiate exactly what that is, but to me, the 45, we're taking 45 million and we're saying, district, you got to take this, or 135, let's go over the course of the 3 years, 135 million. You've got to take, you're going to take those federal dollars and we're going to withhold 135 million of school foundation dollars. So we've just saved 135 million school foundation, but we're saying districts, you're going to have to spend that 135 federal to make up your guarantee. To me, they have to. That's their guarantee. That's their
No, we've
guarantee.
lowered the guarantee by 45 million to get down to the maintenance of effort. And so then the federal spending issue is separate. And if we can save, and it won't be quite 200 million because you get those 2 unknowns in there, but we save 135 million that we don't spend, that stays in the school foundation. You get reserves at the local level, vicinity 200 million. You're talking enough to carry you an extra year when the cliff hits, and that buys us some time we very much need. And there's a lot of uncertainty there as to when that'll happen, because we don't know how much damage Washington is going to do to Wyoming's economy. We just don't. And that'll be reflected in revenue. We just don't know what we're going to get. So I think that's a very important provision. If the notion is, so the school districts will have, it works out, 45 million works out to almost exactly 3% of their total funding is a real reduction. They'll have to stop spending that much. Frankly, I think they could stop spending 10%, and they'd be fine. I think actually the education would improve a little bit because of the way they're spending it. But if an organization that hasn't had to reduce its budget in all these years, it's hit with a 3% cut. If they can't find 3% they can get rid of and live with it, they're not running a human organization that I know.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, so I can assure you that the way you're interpreting section 5B is not the House's position. Period.
The House,
Period.
yeah, we know that.
And if that's where we think we are with this position, this issue, then we should probably move on to the next one.
Well, if we can't get an agreement on this, then we can't get an agreement.
And we don't have an agreement on the revenues.
Yeah, this is, I think we're close on the revenues, but this is.
So, Mr. Chairman, let's look at it a bit differently on what we're going to save. So 135 million, we all agree we're not going to spend that in school foundation dollars. So we're saving that right off the
Right.
top.
Yeah.
Okay, 135, that's not bad.
Yeah.
If we took 25% of the total 273 and said, you've got to put it in a pile, whatever 25%, What's that?
It's
54 million. So we're getting up there 180 million, close to 200 million that we're going to save.
we aren't getting there. And what we're saying is there needs to be a real reduction in spending at the school district level. And if the House can't agree with that, then we just can't agree.
Mr. Chairman, your statement is baffling me, frankly, Senator. Everything else we're talking about is reductions, but this is simply trying to capitalize. We're asking the districts to be supportive of, instead of getting a windfall, we're asking them to help some of that windfall to come in to manage our deficit on our attack on our savings account. I don't understand the logic at all about cutting districts under this particular topic. We're just simply saying we need some of the windfall to help us, period. I'm totally lost while you're talking about cuts under this subject.
Well, we're saying that, let me rephrase this. The House position, as I understand it, is the districts can spend the full amount as of the federal stimulus as they choose within the federal restrictions, right? Am I understanding the House position correctly? As it comes to us.
Mr. Chairman, we're taking away 135 million of their school foundation dollars.
Yeah.
They are going to have to use 135 million to replace those to do the programs they have currently.
Okay.
So we're not
That's-
doing that. And think about, before we get all mad here, think about the big picture. If we don't come out with a bill at all, they get all the money. They get no reductions that we have in the bill on health insurance. And that probably isn't our best position either.
What we're saying is that to make it work, to get enough, frankly, if we turned the federal stimulus down, we'd be talking, okay, we want to take 8 to 10% out of the districts to survive if the stimulus hadn't come along. 3% is not a big deal. We're saying that they need to reduce their spending by that amount. And then we're saying as a compromise, instead of taking the Senate position of we'll save equivalent to all of what we get from the stimulus, we'll save a percentage. And I think that percentage needs to be in the 75%.
I think we're closer than what we think. The 3% you're referring to comes off of the block grant under the other bucket, right? That's what we're talking
Yeah.
about, the reduction. We're not talking about a reduction when we talk about this federal funds. You're not trying to squeeze the districts with the federal funds,
Well,
are you?
we are saying we've got to save those federal funds, because if we want to get up to a reasonable savings that gives us another year to work things out, when we've run through the LISRA, we need to get the savings, we need to get them higher, but right now that's running about 300 million a year. We need to get up at least to that level, and I don't think we're going to quite. We may get there, but if the federal stimulus requirements are pretty mild, because you got that uncertainty in there. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And it means there will have to be a real reduction in the vicinity of 3%. Well, less, we say you've got 25%, you don't have to. That's something they could use to ameliorate that. And that's 90 million, 25% of 90 million, that's 20, 22.5 million across 3 years. If I'm doing my math on the fly right.
And Mr. Chairman, the real challenge with this besides is, okay, we're gonna carve 3% out. But we're gonna carve it out of the districts that have the largest number of Title I students. So the districts that have the least Title I are gonna be less affected than those that have the most Title I. So actually the schools that are in most need, we're gonna carve money out of them. It's not like we're taking it away in the block grant based, for example, when we came out with House Bill 61 and we did a 10% reduction, that was a 10% reduction of ADM and it was like flowed down all the districts equally. In this, the people with the highest Title I students are going to be the ones that are going to be taking the largest
They get
cut.
the most from the federal government. So they would get the most, their 25%, that's where we go, would be the largest.
It would be an equitable cut.
That may be, but that's the federal rules.
Now, we discussed this, Mr. Chairman, a couple hours ago, and we sent staff home to study it all out, make sure everything was in order. I don't want to get bogged down with discussions. We already have a plan. We just have to tweak the number and decide where the number is going to fall so that we're both parties. Am I missing that? Did I miss something that we did not have a plan a couple hours ago and the staff was putting it together?
Yeah.
Staff, do you have something for us in terms of what we described to you and you articulated back to us? I just am confused why we're going back to debating the issue again.
Mr. Chairman,
Then let's talk about the percentage if that's the case.
Mr. Chairman, we're still working on the final language, but where we left it was of the 273 million that's been allocated to the school districts under the Federal American Rescue Plan Act. It's our understanding the negotiation would be on what percent of that total would go to the district's reserves. And that's the number we need to identify.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can we please focus on that number? What is your number? And then we can share with you what we believe our number is.
Okay. The proposal I gave you was that the stuff that wouldn't have to go would be 24.6%. I suggest we go to that 25% is what doesn't have to go in and 75% does have to go dollar for dollar. That's our proposal.
Mr. Chairman, staff, does those equations work? Is that going to satisfy the legalities of what we're doing here?
Mr. Chairman, if I interpret that the proposal would be 75% of the 273 would go to a district's reserve account and be restricted until the legislature allows those funds to be used on a school foundation program purpose.
With the qualification that if we need to spend the money for maintenance of equity, maintenance of effort, school district, that's an exception.
Mr. Chairman, that is
Which
correct.
gives us an uncertainty as to how much the final figure will be.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. And I think the inverse is maybe where the House is closer, where they're saying 25% of the 273 would go into the reserve account and be restricted. I think the Senate's understanding is they want 75% to be restricted of the federal funds.
Yeah.
So I think those are perhaps maybe the two differences.
Thank you, Matt. So, Mr. Chairman, so to be clear, 75 by 25, I know that's where we're hung up, but I would respectfully say they're not getting 50% of the money to begin with because that's being held at the state. That is being held.
Okay, well, you can look at it that way. We're looking at that as a simple reduction, and that's the way it works. And
Yeah, I think based on the revenue discussion we've already had, and then this one, we don't probably need to visit, I don't think, anything more. We're going in 5 minutes. And I guess you can think about whether you want to continue to visit or not. And we're
Okay.
open to continue to visit.